All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a powerhouse in the field of business law and acquisitions, Mitesh Patel, Esquire. As the founder and principal of Blue Sky Law, Mitesh has built a boutique firm that specializes in the sales, acquisitions, and mergers of middle market businesses with enterprise values ranging from $10 million to $150 million. His firm also offers a suite of services in corporate law, taxation, employment, commercial real estate, and business litigation. With an early career at an international law firm and a background as a financial analyst and business owner, Mitesh brings a unique business-first approach to his clients, embodying his firm's motto, providing business solutions through a legal lens. Recognized as a super lawyer, lawyer of distinction, Southeast Prestige Award winner, and Avo's top-rated lawyer, Mitesh holds a BS in Finance from the University of Tennessee and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Florida. When he's not guiding clients to success, you can find him exploring mountain peaks with his wife and 2 teenage kids. Please join me, rise to your feet, and give me a warm welcome for Mitesh Patel.
Good morning. It's good to see you all. I absolutely love this topic of sales, mergers, acquisitions of companies. It's what I eat and breathe almost all the time. I mean, EOers, is there anything else that we talk about? Maybe money and pain in the rear end employees, you know. Beyond that though, it seems like this is one of the biggest topics that we're always talking about. And as I was prepping, I was thinking, okay, how can I take all these years of knowledge and kind of condense it down? What would be the one message that I would want to get across to everybody that's here today? And that message is trust the process. Trust the M&A process. What is this process? I like to sum it up in about 7 steps. Depends on who you talk to and what you read. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10. But lucky number 7, it's pretty easy to roll with. Those 7 steps very quickly are pre-planning, finding your target. Ultimately, you're going to make an offer to them through an LOI. There's going to be a due diligence process. There's going to be legal documentation. You're going to close that deal. And then the final step is there's post-closing. Now, some of these things you can expand on, some you can condense, but ultimately those are kind of the main 7 steps. Ethan gave me a great introduction. Again, my name is Mitesh Patel, principal of Blue Sky Law. I've been doing this for about 20 years or so, involved in the mergers and acquisition space. And like I said a moment ago, I absolutely just love it. Just a moment ago, I said, trust this process, right? Trust this M&A process. Why is it that you all should trust this process? The main reason is that statistically speaking, if you trust this process, and going back to what David was just saying, part of actually all of what David does is baked into one or two of these steps as well, and follows right along with the process that he was talking about. But if you trust this process, statistically speaking, you're going to have a higher probability of getting your deal closed. Depending on whether you're buying a business, selling your business, merging, you're going to get the highest enterprise value. You know, if you're acquiring a business, you're going to know that the price at which you're acquiring that business is right where it should be. We had these 2 executives this one time. They were coming out of corporate America. They wanted to buy a fire suppression business. For those that know Christian, it was not Christian, not his business. But a very similar business, a large fire suppression company in the southeastern United States. And these 2 folks were executives high up again in corporation, and they got there, I have no doubt, because they were extremely anal retentive, type A, detail-oriented, controlling individuals, right? They were able to take their departments, whatever it was that they did, elevate their people, elevate themselves, grab the bull by the horns. And they came into this process as they just left industry. They had a lot of money saved, and they said, hey, they found this business. They said, we're going to buy this. And I would imagine, just like they have done many times, or probably their whole career, they tried to take control of every aspect of this business and the acquisition process. They did not really want to buy into the process. They didn't want to listen. They had hired all these great advisors. They had a kind of a who's who of an acquisition team. So I was like, man, this is going to go great. And it literally took days for them to try to put everybody in a box that they thought they should be in. One advisor dropped out. Another one was disgruntled. I would say we were a little bit disgruntled. We got a call from opposing counsel. It was like, what the heck are you all doing? Like, is this the first time you've done this? And we were like, what are you talking about? They're like, look at these legal documents that you sent to us. So we'd actually sent them to the client sent them on. Little did we know that the client had gone in there and changed all sorts of things to meet their level of comfort, not realizing that what they did is they were shooting themselves in the foot. They were covering things that had already been covered in there. And it didn't take very long for this entire deal to unwind. And I mean, I would say weeks, a couple of weeks into this process. And so as we were processing, we were like, what in the world happened? Why did this thing fall apart with these two really smart, educated individuals? And ultimately, it came down to they didn't trust their team, they didn't trust the process, they weren't willing to follow that process, and it just fell apart. You know, when I say trust the process, it's pretty easy for me to say that because I've been doing it for a long time. But to dig into that a little bit more background, right? Knowing about this process, it's been around for 100 or more years, right? People have been acquiring businesses, selling their businesses, merging with other businesses since the beginning of people having businesses. That's how they grow. All of these little definitions have not really come around until probably, let's call it last 50 or 60 years or so, but generally speaking, that whole process has been there for a really long time. Another reason why I believe in the process so much is there are individuals just like David, John's going to be up here talking, like myself, accountants, that all they do, a whole bunch of nerds, sorry guys, but for their whole career is they dig into one particular area of this mergers and acquisitions process. And I mention that because it'll give you an idea of how refined this is. This is not something that anybody should have to make up or have questions about. There are answers out there for all of you, right? So if you're thinking, gosh, this is something that I want to do, just know that there are people that they do nothing else day in, day out than work on sales, mergers, acquisitions of companies. Another important thing, and David touched on this a little bit when he was talking, but most business owners are really only going to go through this process only one time in their whole career, whether that is acquiring another business, selling their business, or merging, only one time. And I think that's the awesome thing about this crowd and EO generally. We have folks that have done this multiple times. So just know when you hear that, they are in the less than 1% category of business owners, right? So already business owners are narrow field. You take the folks that have done it more than once, it is a really, really small, field. So that's another reason to buy in if you can with a little bit of trust into this process, is knowing that, hey, I might only do this once. Let me not mess it up. Let me make sure that I'm doing this the proper way. There is a significant investment of time, money, and really emotional capital, I think, when going through this. And I think that's another reason why you should go, hey, look, let me again, get the best team that I can, learn and buy into this process, and take it forward, is because as you're going through this process, you've got a business that you're focusing on where you want to keep revenues, cash flow, keep your folks happy, keep your clients happy, and at the same time, you're taking on another job. And it's literally another job that's going to take months, and it can be painful, time-consuming. I think the biggest thing is the emotional piece that we see business owners struggling with as they go through it, because it's hard. So I think that all of those are additional reasons that you should buy into and trust that process. So why is it that folks don't, right? Because it sounds easy enough, just trust it, et cetera. One of the very first things that I touched on was, look, I'll only talk about myself, right? I'm a bit of a control freak. Business owner, how can that be? I know you all are asking yourselves, that's not me. Exerting too much control over this process. I think that's one of the main things that we see where people tend to falter a little bit. The other is, and it kind of goes with control, it is that I can do this attitude. I built this company. I'm smart. I can figure stuff out. I watch YouTube videos and I can change my own can lights. I'm going to watch some videos and I got this thing down. We see that a lot. And I'm like, man, this person's taking a chance on their $15 or $20 million company by trying to do it themselves. All right, knock yourselves out, But that is something else that we see. The third piece, again, I think it kind of all falls in line with the previous 2 points, which are both about control. We'll sometimes hear it as money objections, right? And we'll see business owners trying to get in there and interject themselves, really for the sake of saving some dollars. We were just working on we were on the acquisition side, so we were representing the buyer, and he was moving from the far northeast and buying a pretty large corporate catering company here in the southeastern United States. And we got interviewed by this gentleman, and he was upfront with us. He said, hey, look, I'm talking with other counsel. I said, I think that's great, because when the going gets tough in the deal, you better damn well like who you're working with. Otherwise, you're going to have another issue to deal with. So he was interviewing counsel, and we finished with an hour and a half of chatting. He's like, oh man, this is great. He's like, this has been the best session I've had. He's like, I'll definitely be in touch. But what you've quoted, that's not what I've heard from the other folks. And I was like, hey, look, you've got to do what you've got to do to get your deal done the way that you want it done within your budget. Hey, I can't comment on that. But he called me back in a couple of days and said, hey, look, I've decided to go with another company. I was like, bummer, I'm sorry, but good luck to you. Welcome to the Southeast. He's never lived down here, and I was like, you're going to do really well, which I do think he's going to crush it. 2 months later, which this was just this past October, he called me back. Said, do you mind chatting with me again? And I love these calls. I get them. Maybe just once a year, right? Maybe once every 18 months, but I knew what was coming. He's like, would you maybe consider working with us again? I was like, sure, let's do a little review. He again started asking about dollars, and I was like, hey, look, how did the first foray go with you trying to control your dollars? And I didn't say it quite like that. I'm being a little bit more direct here, right? But it didn't go well, and all that money that he had spent trying to save money, he burned it. We unfortunately couldn't use anything that he had done during that time. But he signed on 2 months later, which was the last week of this December of 23. We got his deal closed. He's a happy camper. Did it cost him more than what he was initially thinking and expecting? Yeah. Did he end up spending double? He did. It was on his own, on his own accord. But that's another, and probably the third most common way that we see people not trusting this process and trying to control it a little bit. I'd like to take a deeper dive into that 7-step process. It's one of the things that we get the most questions about. People going, how do I literally do this? How are we going to go about and find a company to buy? So the first step, I think, is really just thinking about why do you want to do that? This is in the pre-planning phase, kind of phase 1. It's where you're running your pro forma financial statements, you're talking to your financial planner, your CPA, your in-house financial professional going, does this make good sense for us? What can we afford? How are we going to afford it? Do we need to start talking with bankers? And you do during this step, even if you're just tire kicking. Find out what your company can support. If something goes wrong with this acquisition target or a merger target, you need to know that your company can support it. So this is all the pre-planning phase. During that pre-planning phase, if you're actually going out to buy a company, or if you're on the other side, you're selling a company, this is a lot of where David and his company comes in with valuation, and then these next few stages of figuring out, am I getting what I'm paying for? Or if you're selling, am I maximizing the value of my company? Once you've gone through those initial planning stages, then comes the next one, which is target identification. This is a lot of, and we're going to be hearing from John Austinson next. I would imagine that John does a lot of target identification with what he does, which is actually going out and going, okay, I know that I'm in the legal business. I want to acquire another law firm. How do I go about doing that, right? How do I go out and find somebody who is a seller? And there's a big swath of the mergers and acquisitions industry with business brokers. Those of you that know John Roman, it's an EO member. They're investment bankers. And all these folks do is they will help you find companies to acquire that meet your criteria, and sometimes they even help you find the money to go and do the acquisition, and they coach you a little bit. So that is step 2, target acquisition. Once you've identified that and you and your advisors have worked to go, okay, we love this company, we're going to make an offer, that gets to step 3. And this is where things start getting real. This is the LOI phase, letter of intent. You'll hear it couched in different terms. Sometimes it's memorandum of understanding. Sometimes it's just deal terms, term sheet. But essentially what it is it's an offer. You are in writing making an offer to another company saying, hey, look, this is what I would like to offer you for your company. Now, these are not super long documents. They're 3 or 4 pages. They include all the other material items that you're going to need to acquire that business, or that you're asking for, right? So typically covers real estate. Hey, we know you've got a couple of executives. We want to keep them on board. We know that you've got this particular unique asset. We want to take that as well. But I think the really interesting thing, and I like to draw an analogy between buying a business is very much like buying a house. This is a place where in those pre-planning phases, you figured out, okay, we want to be in this school district. We need 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2 garages, etc. You found that house. And an LOI is just like making an offer on a house. And it's very similar even down into the legalese, in that when you make an offer to a business, 98% of those offers are non-binding, which means they are really just an intent to go forward with the deal and to buy that particular business. Now, some are binding, and it depends on the type of deal, what you're looking at, what the person on the other side is really wanting, what they're looking at. But most of these LOIs are non-binding, and just like a home offer, they are contingent upon other things, which brings us to the 4th step, which is due diligence. It's a fancy word for doing your homework. And just as if you're going to go buy a home, once you've got that home under contract, right, you don't have to close on that home if your financing doesn't come through. Yeah, there are always exceptions, right? But if your financing doesn't come through, if you do an inspection and find out that the foundation's cracked, right, you may go, this is too much for me, or hey, we need to renegotiate the price. And that's exactly what that stage 4 due diligence process is for. Buyer or seller, depending on which side you're on, they know that, hey, look, there's going to be a lot of exchanging of information, a lot of talking, a lot of critical questioning, and I would say that that's one of the hardest steps of the acquisition process. It typically lasts about 30 to 60 days of deep digging down into this acquisition target that you have found, and hopefully they're playing ball. They are sending you the information that you're asking for. They are helping you understand what it is that you're asking for, and your advisor should also be helping you understand what you're asking for. So that due diligence phase is your homework. We do see it, although it doesn't happen that often. I would say maybe 15% of the time, where a buyer, or sometimes it's on the sell side, where the parties go through that due diligence and they go, something's not right, And typically we know exactly what it is that's not right. And it leads to one of a few things, either a purchase price adjustment. Hey, we're not going to pay you, $10 million for that business. We're going to pay you 8.5, and we actually want to change a little bit of the deal. We want to hold a little bit more back in escrow, just in case we find another skeleton in the closet. Rarely does it happen, but it could go the other way. Like, hey, during this 60, 90 days of doing due diligence, this and that, we've absolutely crushed it, right? And if you're selling your business, you may go, I don't want to sell for what I agreed to with you just 3 or 4 months ago. My apologies, but now I need a little bit more. And we do see that happen. Sometimes folks just flat out back out of the deal. And just like with that fire suppression company that I was giving that example on, that's exactly what happened, is the sellers on the other side said, forget it, right? We're not interested in this Mickey Mouse sort of thing. We're going to go find somebody else that knows what they're doing to buy this business. Once you make your way through that due diligence process, you get to step 5, which is legal documentation. Of course, selfishly, I think this is the hardest part of a transaction, but that is what we do. It is typically a month or more of your attorneys being turned loose on producing 15 to 20 documents, massive purchase agreement if there's a building that's involved, buying the building, doing that purchase agreement, ancillary documents, et cetera, non-competes for the executive team, you name it. By the time we finish, there are hundreds of pages of documents. But typically your legal team, everybody's like, oh, it's going to cost. It always depends on the complexity of the transaction, but just know that legal fees are typically back-end loaded, where once you get within 6 weeks, 8 weeks of closing, that's really where you're going to start incurring the vast majority of your legal expenses. It is still possible at this stage for parties to back out. Sadly, we did have a deal that just died officially on us over this past weekend. We're working with an infrastructure construction company that's out of Dallas, Texas, and going back to process and trusting the process. From the very get-go, our client agreed to a price he didn't like. And so at every step along this process, he was interjecting little roadblocks, like, and grumbling. You know, that's how we business owners do it. We grumble, and eventually he's just like, I'm just not gonna do it. And I think that it was a combination of a few things. Not having the right advice early on, this is, before we and a few other advisors were involved, not trusting where this was gonna go, even though we told him, like, hey, it's gonna progress in this kind of manner. This is gonna come up, a few weeks from now. Not really fully appreciating and I think understanding where that was gonna go, and it died. And we were in the phase of legal documentation. He'd already spent a pretty decent amount of money, and so did the other side on that. So you still have the ability to back out at that phase, and he did back out. It's very unfortunate, but he's got a phenomenal company. He's gonna sell it again in no time. That moves us on to the 6th phase, which is actually closing. Once you get through all the hardcore negotiations on those legal documents, you're gonna move to closing. That's really more of a logistical exercise. Sadly, folks don't get together anymore. I mean, we used to get together in a room and loads of documents. There'd be champagne in a bucket waiting. We might do that once every 5 years now. If y'all want to do a closing with champagne, let me know. I'm totally down. But it's just not something that happens that much anymore. It's all over the phone and internet, but you close, and then the last step is post-closing integration. This is really where you're taking the teams and you're introducing them to each other. This is where you're taking the assets and going, okay, we're gonna move them from that building to this building. We're gonna integrate software, et cetera. So that is just in a very quick nutshell, those 7 steps of this process. And again, taking it back kind of full circle, I think that as you all are contemplating entering the process, whether you're looking at buying a company, whether you're looking at selling your company, whether you're looking at merging with another company, go back to the advice that David had, which is what I am going to reiterate here, which is know that there's a process, know that there are people out there that are willing to help you. Start early. Start early. It never hurts, right? If you're way too out early, you can slow things down. But don't shoot yourself in the foot. Start early. Trust the process. And if you do, everything will go great. Appreciate your all's time.